So one last article that I want to touch on is something that I saw tweeted out by the Direwolves, which was in the Wild World of Sports website, which is about their high performance center. Um, the high performance center, not a new thing. It's been around for over a year now. This is a picture that was taken. I'm not sure if this is like a new area that they have. This article just seems to be talking about the high performance center in general, about esports, and this is something which really validates esports in our country because it's at the SCG, um, which is massive. And one of the players, I forget which one, was saying how his dad really started getting on board with what he was doing when he realized that his son was playing at the SCG. And he's a big cricket fan, and he's like, I can't believe this. Like, I'm so jealous. So I think a lot of parents would feel similar and similarly to when Legacy partnered with the Crows, and all of a sudden there was Legacy branding on the stadium in Adelaide. That's something that again just shows kids that, well, if this is something that I follow, not only is it just like a niche thing which is online, but it's in the real world, and my parents can see it, and I can explain to them, wow, that's the Legacy logo. Like, this is a team that I follow online in League of Legends, and they can start talking and start a conversation that way. So I think like the more often that this happens, it just starts developing conversation between generations, which is really important to breaking down barriers in industry wide. So like sponsorships, um, new players being given the opportunity to train from their parents, and new parents giving their kids the opportunity to go to events. All that starts with positive media um, and conversations, really. So
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it's when it gets sensationalized on the news channels in quotations for those that can't see it. It gives it a massive bad rap, but that's what you need, more exposure, like everyone's been saying, from um, I've lost the word, freelancers and people wanting to get the good stories out there and spread that, that positive image of gaming, that it's not people just sitting at home in a basement playing stuff.
Yeah, it's not that many images on there, but that looks a lot like the Drop Bears training facility as well.
yeah, I believe it's the same.
Yeah.
I'm going to paste it in chat so people can read it.
Which I wouldn't be surprised, because I believe, is it Dave?
Yes, Dave Harris.
Does he own both
Yeah,
Direwolves
so
and Drop Bears?
Dave Harris
So I'm
owns
not surprised then.
Direwolves, Drop Bears, Interstellar, and now XL Esports in the UK, who's in the LPL now.
Does he?
So they run a company called Genevieve Capital, and
Yeah.
Genevieve Capital is the overarching company that has all these separate entities under them, and each of their esports teams have a different brand. So that's why there was Sydney Saints when they had the female CSGO roster, Darksided, Direwolves, Drop Bears, and I think another one.
Yeah, Interstellar and the Dire Cubs, which is my personal favorite. Their feeder team, or what's it? Academy team rather.
Academy.
Yeah, Dire Cubs. Yeah, that was great. Great branding there.
I did like that, because I don't believe any other organization in AU had separate branding for their academy team, and even now in the NA league, whatever their professional league is called, I don't really follow it, but no one really does do separate branding for their academy teams. Just, for example, Chiefs, they just had Chiefs and then Chiefs Academy.
I think it's a very smart business decision by them, because having different brands for all of their different teams means that they can go out to sponsors and tap into different basic markets and revenue opportunities. So they could have Direwolves, which is sponsored by Logitech, which it's not just an example, and then they could have Direwolves Cubs sponsored by X, Y, and Z, and then they could have Drop Bears sponsored by Logitech's competitors. And so they can it opens up more opportunities for each of their brand, but it also causes a lot of more work because
Yeah,
it's
I
pretty
think
much
there's
having.
pros and cons definitely, and
I
like I think the
Mm.
ability to separate off certain games is good, and I think Counter-Strike is a perfect example because that's a game where a lot of brands won't touch, and they'll say, look, if you have Counter-Strike anywhere near our logo, we don't care, we don't want to have a bar of it. But if you can separate that off into a separate brand, um, and then you can have League of Legends or Overwatch or whatever all in a lump, they'll be like, okay, that's something that we can get on board. So yeah, it's good, but like there's definitely pros and cons with
if
separating it
you
off. And
if you actually look into NRG last year, they had different sponsors. I'm pretty confident they had at least one specific sponsor for nearly every game they covered. So
yeah, I
they
don't know
had
much about it.
they had different sponsors for different games. I believe their fighting game, was it fighting or was it just Smash? I'm not really sure specifics on that. But they didn't have like any of the same peripheral PC sponsors that the CS team has, for example. And they were very clear on that. So if you ever go to MetaThreads, I think that's their jersey supplier.
Yeah,
And you can go through the NRG store and all their jerseys are separated by the different teams, and you can just look at the back of the jerseys and they'll have different sponsors because they have different sponsors for each game. And it was really good. I was listening to Dexerto, I can't remember the site name specifically.
Dexterra, I think it is.
Dexerto, yeah. Richard Lewis now taken over a podcast for them, and he did one with the NRG owner, and he really broke down on how specific, like how hard it is for sponsors to come into a scene when you have a CS:GO team. And it just comes down, and I do believe it would be a lot harder over in NA. It doesn't help that their title and their like margins for money and everything is a lot higher compared to us in Oceania, but
Still pretty high here.
It is still pretty high here, but I still feel that American culture makes it a lot harder. And he broke it down. It's seriously as simple as if CS:GO wasn't as specific as terrorist versus counter-terrorist.
Yeah.
If it was red versus blue, there would be no problems. And you can look at when Crown Casino in Melbourne in 2015.
Yeah.
When that was on Fox Sports, they had the word terrorist bleeped out and covered every time it came up, even when it was counter-terrorist went around. It was counter beep, and then it was just beep went around. So, yeah, so that went off track, but it is hard when you have a CS team, and that's where Direwolves have they've done really well there with their external branding. Having the capital company have done really well there, making it because I believe Direwolves, they actually said after they had their last CS team, which was
that was ages ago.
That was maybe 2014. That was back with Vox Eminal. I can't remember that lineup off the top of my head. Moop and Frequent, maybe Susie. I'm not specifically sure.
It was a long time.
It was a long time ago, and they have never returned to CS:GO. And it's a matter of fact that when you look at the history of sponsors with Direwolves, it's not big, but I'm pretty sure it's sponsors that no one else has touched in ANZ or has been with for long in ANZ, and it's because they're sponsors that won't touch CS:GO.
Yeah, and I know that PUBG gets around the violence factor in China by making the blood green, and is it green or a different color?
You can have, I think, 5 different colors now: purple, pink, green, blue, and then red.
And is that the reason, Ezra? It's because the Chinese market really dictates that that's what it has to be like?
Yeah.
From memory, you're not allowed to have blood in your games in China. Like, you can't have red blood.
Yeah, so the blood color is changed because of parameters by
so
the
it's
Asian
more like
market.
a simulation or a paintball game is what they're trying to sell over there.
Yeah. Instead of real life.
Makes sense. I did hear recently, I forget where I heard it, but someone suggesting something similar for Counter-Strike where you just market it as like a simulation and you get around a lot of those issues. But because Counter-Strike's such a purist esport, it's been around for over 20 years. A lot of the community is very stubborn with changing those aspects of the game. So, and I think that it's quite self-sustainable. I'd argue it's the most self-sustainable esport in the world, with with not a lot of developer backing, and mostly run by third parties and financed by third parties. So even though and sponsors are, I think, opening up to it, it's just taking a while.